Ayo, it's Retro. Welcome to another video. Y'all, Amazing Spider-Man has just launched a brand new #1 by Joe Kelly, Pepe Larraz, Marte Gracia, John Romita Jr., and Marcio Moniz helming the character. Now, I talked about the prospect of this run in my 8 Deaths of Spider-Man review, and I did that like a couple videos ago. If y'all want to watch that, I'll have that linked right here. And my perspective of this run has completely changed. Like, what I thought this run was going to be, what I felt like we were going to get from this new Amazing Spider-Man run, it's not what we got. Like, I am floored by what we're getting. And I remember seeing, god damn, y'all, I've been recording, like, this is like my third take of this video. Just a quick PSA, and I'm over it. I remember seeing this announcement for this run, and I was pretty hesitant. I'm gonna be real with you. Not because of Pepe Larraz. Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia, like, I would have read the first issue at least anyway, but seeing Joe Kelly, I wasn't the most confident in this run. Not because I think Joe Kelly is a bad writer, but I've been wanting like a fresh new writer to touch the title of Amazing Spider-Man for a very long time. And Joe Kelly is no stranger to Spider-Man whatsoever. He's written several runs on the character. However, like I said, Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia drawing this, that is enough to make me tune in. That's enough to make me at least check this out. With all the controversy, polarizing opinions, and Peter being in what some would say is the most stagnant state he has ever been, is it worth reading Amazing Spider-Man this year? I kind of touched on the history of Amazing Spider-Man in my 8 Deaths of Spider-Man video, but I only really spoke about the last 15 years. The character created by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee has gone on to become the most popular Marvel superhero ever. With over 60 years of publishing history, the changes that has befallen the character has become the most polarizing and controversial topic to be sparked in the comics community, especially in recent years. But today, I wanted to really dive in with my experience, expectations, and overall feelings on the title in this year. The state of Amazing Spider-Man creatively as a title since Superior Spider-Man has been a mess. Overall, most would say this has started since Marvel's infamous One More Day event that saw Peter Parker sell his marriage to Mephisto for the life of Aunt May. My own thoughts on that aside, I personally, look, I'm not selling my marriage. My aunt, she could, maybe I'm just not that connected, but selling your marriage is stupid. But my own thoughts on this event aside, like I said on this channel before, I actually really liked Brand New Day and Big Time as Spider-Man runs. I liked them quite a bit. I had a lot of fun reading them in recent years. For those that are new and don't know, Brand New Day was an initiative following One More Day that basically saw a team of creatives rebuilding Spider-Man's life now that he is a single 20-something-year-old and has to find a new job and everything. Like, this is basically a reboot of the character in modern times. The only reboot we would see of any Marvel character, really. Brand New Day included writers like Dan Slott, Mark Waid, Joe Kelly, Zeb Wells, Mark Guggenheim, along with a plethora of other writers who would take on issues and just write stories during this time just to kind of fill in this basically new life for Peter Parker. These writers and artists would team up with Tom Brevoort and Stephen Racker, the editors of Spider-Man at this time, to create the Spidey Brain Trust. The Spidey Brain Trust would essentially be a team of creators with guidelines on how to handle the character of Spider-Man and Peter Parker, what they can and can't do, and this team would essentially be entrusted with the character creating this mid-20-something's life for him. The guidelines are definitely somewhere if you do research. I'm not gonna really talk about what they could do and what they couldn't do. That's not what this video is really about. Just my feelings proceeding this era of Spider-Man. Now, like I said, Brand New Day in a vacuum, I actually really love. I think in a lot of ways, ignorance is bliss in this situation. And if you wanted a modern Spider-Man run, this is where you go. A lot of the art is beautiful. The writers write a very compelling Spider-Man for my money, and it is really concise for the amount of creatives that are actually writing this title. You have stories like New Ways to Die, New Ways to Live. You have Spider Island. You have The Ends of Earth. You have Big Time. You have all of these stories. Emergency Stop with Mark Waid and Marcos Martin. You have even issues by Dan Slott and Marcos Martin. A lot of creators touched this title and produced some really amazing stories. I've loved everything from this. Most of it, really. The weakest writers to me were really Mark Guggenheim. Mark Waid's issues were amazing. Even Roger Stern and Lee Weeks would write an issue. Like, this era is fantastic, and it's really interesting to see the amount of creators who would come on to write this issue, and it would effectively fill out this modern era of Spider-Man and create the shift on what Peter Parker is supposed to look like post One More Day. Now, like I said, this would take us through the entirety of Dan Slott's run, at least up until Superior Spider-Man. Brand New Day would have a lot of issues written by Dan Slott, and then Dan Slott would later come on with Big Time after we have realized that he has written the best issues and his issues sold the best. He would take on the title with Big Time. He would write one of the best Amazing Spider-Man runs outside of Stan Lee and John Romita, Roger Stern and Romita Jr., and J. Michael Straczynski's Amazing Spider-Man run. Like, these issues, Big Time, are some of the best Spider-Man issues ever. And his run would span multiple relaunches until he finally takes Spider-Man Global. Amazing Spider-Man Worldwide would take a more Tony Stark / Iron Man perspective on the character. At this point, Peter Parker is filthy rich, running Parker Industries, a company at the cutting edge of technology. And at this point, Spider-Man is essentially a bodyguard for Peter Parker. And for all its flack, a lot of what makes Dan Slott a really great Spider-Man writer is the swings that he takes on the character and the challenges that he presents for the title. I feel like there really hasn't been a writer who's challenged Peter Parker this much outside of, you know, the ones that we know the best. And I think Dan Slott really made his mark on the title by doing this as well, making great swings. You have stuff like Big Time where he is at the best place ever. He has a stable job, basically. He has so much resources at his disposal. He has a girlfriend, a stable relationship at this point. And then, you know, Otto Octavius takes over his body and becomes Superior Spider-Man for a very long time. And then that would relaunch and Peter Parker would get his body back and you would have Spider-Verse. And, you know, Dan Slott takes Spider-Man multiversal. And now Peter Parker is rich, and we see his approach to being rich and being the CEO of a company that is at the cutting edge of technology, and how he handles being a superhero still. A lot of what has made Amazing Spider-Man, to me, a little stale was just this constant state of Peter Parker just being relatable, being a broke 20-something-year-old and telling superhero stories. This would be the revolving door of his stories once Tom DeFalco left the title and up until J. Michael Straczynski would take on the character. A lot of what makes Spider-Man interesting as a character and as a title is not necessarily the fact that he is just a 20-something-year-old, but what the writer does with that fact. Between his conflict with Mr. Negative to becoming an engineer at Horizon, having Otto Octavius control his body, becoming Spider-Man, and then now coming back to becoming CEO of Parker Industries, Dan Slott has really took some incredible swings on the character. This run starts with the fact that Peter Parker is CEO and is confronting a new incarnation of the Zodiac Gang alongside S.H.I.E.L.D. As a starting point, I have to say, this is not the best place to start any Spider-Man comic. I think that, like, I normally say you can start anywhere, and I genuinely think that you can start here and be fine. But if you're asking me, this will just basically be like starting Star Wars at Return of the Jedi or at Revenge of the Sith. Like, yes, you can absolutely do that, but you're missing out on Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope. Why would you start at the end of a story? You can just start at the beginning. And while I think the biggest crime of this book is just the fact that it is aggressively okay, I do just genuinely think as a starting point for Amazing Spider-Man, it's just not that great. Like, it kind of thrust you into this new status quo, and you are used to Peter Parker being this regular Joe Schmo 20-something-year-old that is also a superhero, and I can understand why people wouldn't start here, quite frankly. Now, if you are coming off the high of Superior Spider-Man and the 2013 relaunch. While I'm not the biggest fan of that relaunch, but it is like, if you're coming off of that, I think this is a perfect place to go. Like, just finish out this Dan Slott saga. It is amazing. Like, it finishes off this saga perfect. Especially Amazing Spider-Man 801 is one of the best Amazing Spider-Man comics ever. Just period. But if you're looking for something new, something fresh, a title that handles that very well, this isn't that. Like, the ideas are new. Like, this is a new take for Spider-Man for Peter Parker, and it's not handled the best. I think Dan Slott has absolutely written better comics, like Big Time, like his issues in Brand New Day, even his Silver Surfer run. Like, he has written better comics, but Worldwide is just okay. I will say Giuseppe Camuncoli's art throughout this run is phenomenal. Like, it is some of the best art you can see in a Spider-Man comic, and the new suit design for him, this Worldwide suit design, is my favorite redesign of a Spider-Man suit ever. Now, at the end of this run, Parker Industries would completely fail and disintegrate, and Peter Parker would become broke again, and we would go back to basics with Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley taking over Amazing Spider-Man in 2018. Nick Spencer would later be joined primarily by Patrick Gleason and Mark Bagley for the rest of this run. Once Ryan Ottley leaves the title, the biggest issue with this run is just its lackluster scope. I am not the biggest fan of this run. I have a lot of nostalgia for this series. I came back to reading Amazing Spider-Man for the first time with this run. I was in like college, and I went out to a comic store for the first time in a very long time. I found the first 2-3 volumes of this run, and I was like, let me pick it up, and I read it, and I enjoyed it for what it was at the time. And as a matter of fact, once I finished volume 3, I actually kept up with the title. But this run just doesn't seek out to do anything great. It makes the impossible promise to try and retcon One More Day, which it doesn't do, and instead retcon Since Past, which, while I think Since Past should be retconned, I am also just not that crazy for it being retconned. Like, I'm not crazy for that. Like, it's, if you don't know, Since Past is essentially just a story where we find out that Green Goblin Gwen Stacy, and this kind of further creates like this evil like persona for Green Goblin, and I don't think that should be in comics. Like, I know like this should happen, but this happened seemingly out of nowhere to me. I don't think this should have ever been a thing. And while I'm not the biggest stickler for retconning stories, like I feel like they have to be truly and utterly disgusting, and this one is. I genuinely just feel like Since Past was one of those stories that just did not connect with me. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It could have, like, you could have said this never existed, and I'd believe you, because when I go back and read Stan Lee and Romita's Amazing Spider-Man, when I go back and read Gary Conway and Gil Kane's Amazing Spider-Man, none of that connects for me. Like, that doesn't, like, to me, when I read those runs, Since Past never happened. It happened after the fact. Spencer's run outside of that, though, is just generally just like a fun, okay Spider-Man run. I think the first volume is the best arc of all of these. It's the most fun. It's the one Spider-Man arc in the last like probably 5-6 years where you could really feel like you can ingratiate a new fan into this title. Throughout this run, MJ and Peter Parker are actually together, which is nice and it's cute, but their relationship is kind of just half-baked, and there is constantly this looming threat of the fact that they just can't be together long-term anyway, so it kind of just isn't handled that well. Spencer doesn't really do anything with that either, and we do get an arc called Last Remains where we kind of get this hint that maybe One More Day is going to be retconned, but instead, like I said, this just retcons Since Past instead. Truthfully, this is probably MJ and Peter Parker's most boring writing as a couple, and it's a shame. I think that MJ as a character is so much more than just Peter Parker's girlfriend or wife. She is an incredible character, and some people come to this title solely for Mary Jane Watson, and this title, this run, I can definitely see MJ fans not really being the biggest fan of it. As a starting point, like I said, it's actually a pretty great start. If you want to just read the first 3 arcs and then just like maybe read something else, I think you should. Those are really good, and it's not my first choice, but it does get the job done as a back to basics run on the character. Nick Spencer's run would end at around issue 75, and after this we would get something called Spider-Man Beyond. And I'm not going to touch too much on this story. I will probably make a video on this eventually, but this essentially just saw Ben Reilly coming back and becoming a corporate Spider-Man. We see Ben Reilly's conflict with Peter Parker and how he wants to coexist in this time. This is also where Chasm comes about, and this run is interesting, if not pretty fun for a while. This run is led by Patrick Gleason, Zeb Wells, Cody Ziegler, Saladin Ahmed, Kelly Thompson, Mark Bagley, and Jed McKay. I actually liked a decent part of this. Patrick Gleason and Zeb Wells' issues were some of the best, and I actually wish Patrick Gleason was the writer of Spider-Man moving forward, but we ended up getting Zeb Wells, who I actually was pretty excited about. All of these writers really I would have been fine with. Zeb Wells is fresh off of writing Hellions, his best work of his career, and one of the best X-Men comics to have come out in the last 25 years, honestly. Even one of the best comics to come out in the Krakoan era. You also have Kelly Thompson, who was fresh off of writing Captain Marvel, the best Captain Marvel run ever. And Saladin Ahmed is, I think at this time, still writing Miles Morales, but he is just about at the end of his run, and the best Miles Morales at this time also. All of the writers of this era were at the peak of their prime. Patrick Gleason just finished co-writing Superman. Jed McKay just finished writing Black Cat, an illustrious run. And Mark Bagley is a legend. Who would not want him to write Spider-Man or draw Spider-Man, really? Anybody that came from this era would have been a great choice. Now, I actually was pretty much picking Kelly Thompson for a myriad of reasons. I think having a woman write Spider-Man would have been very interesting, especially because we haven't had a woman write the title for a full run ever, but also because I actually really liked Captain Marvel as a whole. Zeb Wells writing Spider-Man after Beyond was, to me, that was the best pick, and that would spawn the new Amazing Spider-Man 2022 volume. And out of the last 3 major runs, I actually believe Zeb Wells' first arc is the most well put together of the 3. Now, the first issue isn't the greatest. It bogs down the title with all of this everybody hates Peter Parker crap, but when the conflict with Tombstone begins, it is phenomenal, and it just never stops for that first arc. This becomes a psychological and physical conflict with Lonnie Lincoln, and it's great. It ends with Peter Parker outsmarting Tombstone and really having him play into his hand. This kicks off a long, sprawling saga that is mostly dealing with Tombstone and street level crime, but also the title kind of goes off the rails a bit. When this title is dealing with Tombstone and the gangs of New York, that's when it's at its best. Now, this run is pretty much hit or miss. You have stories like Dead Language and Dark Web, which are just utterly just so bad. And then you have Gang War, which is pretty fun. You also have stuff like Breathe, Dead Wrong. You have Spider-Man's First Hunt, which is just amazing. You have Going Green, where Peter Parker becomes sort of like a Green Goblin character. When this title is dealing with Peter Parker, Norman Osborn, and just a street level crime, it's amazing. When it's dealing with the Ben Reilly subplot, MJ and Paul and the new Sinister Six, it falls quite a bit. It is really the definition of hit or miss. Half of the story arcs in this run are really good, and half of it are really bad. Now, like I said, this run goes off the rails quite a bit. We even get a section where Peter Parker is injected with the sins of Norman Osborn and becomes evil. If you even want to know what the hell happens there, back in Nick Spencer's run, Norman Osborn was shot by Sin Eater, and he essentially removed all of Norman Osborn's sins, kind of turning Norman into a new character. He is really trying to do good for the first time in his life, and he is doing his best to become a good person. Now, those sins had to go somewhere, and over the course of these 2 runs, they would float everywhere, and eventually Kraven would find these sins and infuse it into a spear. Eventually, Kraven would try and stab Norman Osborn with these sins, but he would end up actually stabbing Peter Parker because Peter is trying to save Norman Osborn at this point. A lot happened, but there is also just this Spider-Man having his first hunt, which was, I thought, a really interesting inversion on Kraven's Last Hunt. It's not a bastardization on it. I think it is just like a fun inversion. It's not trying to undo it. I think it's just like, let's go back and do a different version of this. And I thought it was really good. Derivative, sort of, but having Peter Parker turn evil, I think that's really interesting. I've been of the mindset that this series' hate is kind of overblown. Like I said, at its best, it's okay. It's hit or miss. At its worst, it's just kind of nonsense. You know, some of the stories are just not great. Dead Language is probably the worst story in this. It's the worst offender. Unfortunately, we did have a situation where Marvel editorial asked Zeb Wells to kill Kamala Khan so that she can become a mutant. And look, that is a bad look, and killing Miss Marvel for no reason, just so she can be a mutant, is just, that is no reason. That's going to be a blight on this run forever, and people won't hear it. You know, Amazing Spider-Man number 25 is actually one of the better like issues of this run, showing, you know, MJ's journey from going to that new dimension and how she even becomes, you know, a partner to Paul. And you see that their relationship is not even really that bad. Like they get together through circumstance, not necessarily because like she's cheating or because like Stockholm syndrome. Like it's really just like they are together for years. You know, over time you build a rapport and chemistry with someone when you are the only two people alive. Like, you know, like it just kind of happens, but it is what it is. This video really isn't about their relationship. It's just about this run and these runs and how this affects my opinion on the title of Amazing Spider-Man going forward. Now we would also have a Death of Spider-Man. Like I said, I did make a video on that, so you can see, so you can go ahead and watch that. But this would lead into Joe Kelly, Pepe Larraz, Marte Gracia, John Romita Jr., and Marcio Moniz taking over the character. And this run is now 3 issues deep. I think by the time this video comes out, there may be a 4th issue. I'm not entirely sure. Amazing Spider-Man is still doing that bi-weekly, bi-monthly thing where you get 2 issues a month. At the time of this recording, I have read 3 issues, the first 3 issues, and so far we have gotten glimpses towards Peter Parker's early life when he was a middle schooler or in elementary school, one of those, and we see a bit of his past as a delinquent child with his friends, and it's incredibly charming and fun, and we get to see a side of Peter Parker we haven't seen in a long time. Peter as well has a new job working for Rand Industries, a company at the cutting edge of technology, whatever the hell that means, but that makes me happy. I loved that status quo for him when he was working as an engineer for Horizon, so this is right up my alley. Peter Parker reconnecting with an old friend is great as we get to see more of how Peter Parker is as a friend and as a person. We also still get connections to his main supporting cast. Randy Robertson and Shay Markin are a big focus in this run, and we get a lot of them during this. Shay Markin is Peter Parker's new girlfriend who was introduced a little over a year or 2 ago in Zeb Wells' run. She is a nurse at Ravencroft. Ravencroft is Marvel's Arkham Asylum, basically, and she's a nurse there. And Peter Parker and Shay, they have a history. They are dating, sort of. Their relationship is interesting. I like them a lot. I want to see more of them. I know it's going to be short-lived. I know that. But if it runs even for like 3-4 years, I'd be happy. I think they're a very fun couple. Overall, I think this is a very solid start to Amazing Spider-Man. Peter Parker has a new job. His friends love him, and he reconnects with a new friend who is looking out for him. You really can't get much more out of it. The main conflict is dealing with memories and hallucinations, so that, you know, you get a little bit of like a scarecrow sort of. We reintroduce this character named Itsy Bitsy, who was created in Joe Kelly's Deadpool/Spider-Man, and she has a new design. She seems like a fun character. I did not read that run, so I don't know much about her, but she seems like a really fun character, and I'm looking forward to her conflict with Spider-Man in this run. I can't convince everyone to read this run. So far, I can just tell you that it is good. I love it. I am enjoying it. I'm doing my best to ignore the discourse online just because it is absolutely horrid. I am completely over Spider-Man discourse online. It is just the most annoying thing ever. The only thing I can tell you is that I am heavily enjoying this run, and I'm even looking forward to John Romita Jr.'s issues with Hellgate, whatever the hell that is supposed to be. All I can say is that this title seems like it's in good hands, and I'm excited for what's to come. If you've been enjoying this new Amazing Spider-Man run, Let me know in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next video. Peace.